What if I told you that a single stormy night could transform a struggling gas station attendant into the head of a billion-dollar company's most important project? This is the incredible story of Marcus Rivera, whose brilliant engineering mind was hidden behind coveralls and grease stains until Eleanor Whitman's broken-down electric supercar brought them together on Highway 23 in Millbrook, Ohio. In just a few hours, Marcus would go from pumping gas to holding the keys to an entirely new life, proving that extraordinary opportunities can come disguised as simple problems that need solving. You're about to witness how one act of mechanical genius and unexpected kindness would change two lives forever and bring hope to an entire struggling community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Kowalski's Corner gas station as Marcus Rivera wiped the sleep from his eyes and unlocked the front door. The familiar smell of motor oil and coffee greeted him as he flipped the switches, bringing the fluorescent lights to life with their characteristic buzz. At 45, Marcus moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had learned to make every motion count, every minute matter. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, though he knew the dollar would barely stretch to cover his mother's medications and the mounting bills that seemed to multiply faster than he could pay them. The bell above the door chimed as Pete Kowalski shuffled in, his arthritis making him move slower than usual in the cool October air. Pete owned the station, but had been gradually turning over more responsibilities to Marcus as his health declined. "Morning, Pete. How are the joints today?" "Like rusty bolts in winter," Pete replied with a grimace. "Thank God I've got you too. Handle the heavy lifting. Coffee ready?" Marcus nodded toward the coffee maker that was already brewing. "Give it another minute. I started it when I came in." Pete settled onto the worn stool behind the counter, watching Marcus check the register and organize the morning paperwork. The older man had come to rely on Marcus more than he cared to admit, not just for the physical work, but for the young man's uncanny ability to diagnose problems that left other mechanics scratching their heads. "You know, Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about the Patterson truck. You were right about that transmission issue. How'd you know it wasn't the clutch like everyone else thought?" Marcus paused in his counting of the till. The sound was wrong. When metal grinds against metal in a clutch, it has a different pitch than when gear teeth are slipping. Plus, the way he described the vibration pattern, it had to be coming from the transmission housing. 30 years I've been running this place, and I still don't hear things the way you do." Pete shook his head in wonder. "Where'd you learn to listen like that?" "My dad taught me when I was young. He said a good mechanic uses all his senses, not just his eyes." Marcus's voice carried a hint of something deeper, a past he rarely discussed. "Sound tells you what's happening inside an engine before you ever pop the hood." The coffee maker finished with a gurgle, and Marcus poured 2 cups, handing one to Pete. The older man wrapped his gnarled fingers around the warm mug, studying Marcus over the rim as he sipped. "You ever think about opening your own shop? With skills like yours, you could make real money." Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm fine where I am, Pete. Besides, this town needs someone who'll give folks an honest price for honest work." Before Pete could respond, the roar of a diesel engine announced the arrival of their first customer. Through the window, they watched James Big Jim Thompson climb down from his 18-wheeler, his massive frame making the truck's cab look almost normal-sized. "Morning, gentlemen," Big Jim called as he pushed through the door. "Got a problem that's been bugging me since Toledo. Engine's running rough, but I can't figure out what's causing it." Marcus set down his coffee and walked outside with Big Jim, listening as the trucker described the symptoms. The engine was idling, and Marcus stood near the front of the truck, his head tilted slightly as he concentrated on the sounds coming from under the hood. "When did it start?" Marcus asked. "About 200 miles back. Thought it might be bad. Fuel, but I topped off with premium at the last stop and it didn't help." Marcus walked around the truck, checking different angles, his trained ear picking up subtle variations in the engine's rhythm. He stopped near the driver's side wheel well, crouching down to listen more closely. "Pop the hood for me," he called. "Big." Jim obliged, and Marcus examined the engine compartment with the methodical precision of someone who understood the intricate dance of pistons, valves, and timing chains. He traced several hoses with his fingers, checked connections, and finally located a small vacuum line that had worked itself loose. "There's your problem," Marcus said, pointing to the disconnected hose. "This vacuum line feeds your emission control system. When it's loose, it throws off your air-fuel mixture and makes the engine run rough." He reconnected the line and had Big Jim rev the engine. The rough idle smoothed out immediately, settling into the steady purr of a well-tuned diesel. "I'll be damned," Big Jim said, shaking his head in amazement. 3 mechanics between here and Toledo looked at this thing, and none of them caught that. "How much do I owe you?" "Just the cost of coffee if you want some." That was a 5-minute fix. Big Jim pulled out a $20 bill despite Marcus's protests. "A man's got to eat, and good work deserves good pay. You saved me an expensive tow and probably a week in the shop." As Big Jim drove away, Pete emerged from the station office, having watched the entire interaction through the window. "That's the 3rd time this week you fixed something other mechanics missed," Pete observed, "beginning to think you're wasted pumping gas and changing oil." Marcus was already moving toward the next task, checking the air pressure gauge and preparing for the morning rush of commuters. "Every job's important, Pete. People depend on us to keep their cars running so they can get to work, take our kids to school, visit family. That's worth something." The bell chimed again as Miguel Santos pushed through the door, his school backpack slung over one shoulder. At 17, Miguel had the lanky build of someone still growing into his frame, but his eyes held a maturity that came from shouldering responsibilities too early in life. "Hey, Mr. Marcus, got time to look at something before school?" "What's the problem, Miguel?" "Mom's car is making a clicking sound when she turns the steering wheel. She's worried it's something expensive." Marcus grabbed a small toolbox from behind the counter. "Let's take a look. Your mom's parked out back?" They walked to where Maria Santos's 15-year-old Honda Civic sat in the small employee parking area. Marcus had been informally mentoring Miguel for the past year, teaching him basic automotive maintenance as a way to help the family save money on repairs. "Start her up and turn the wheel back and forth," Marcus instructed. Miguel slid into the driver's seat and followed the directions. The clicking sound was immediately apparent, coming from somewhere in the front end of the car. "What do you think?" "It is?" Marcus asked, testing Miguel's growing knowledge. Miguel listened carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It sounds like it's coming from the wheel area, and it only happens when turning. Maybe something in the steering system." "Good. Here, more specifically, the CV joint?" "Exactly. The constant velocity joint is starting to wear out. It's not dangerous yet, but your mum should get it looked at in the next month or so before it gets worse." Miguel's face fell. "That sounds expensive." "Actually, it's not as bad as it could be. I know Carlos at the parts store, and I can walk you through the replacement if your mum's okay with that. Might cost her $60 in parts instead of $300 at a regular shop." "Really? You do that?" "Knowledge is meant to be shared, Miguel. Besides, you're getting good at this stuff. Time you learned how to do more than just change oil and filters." Miguel's face lit up with a grin. "Thanks, Mr. Marcus. I better get to school, but I'll tell Mom tonight." As Miguel hurried off to catch his bus, Marcus returned to the station to find Pete watching him with an expression of quiet approval. "That boy's lucky to have you looking out for him," Pete said. "His mom works 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Least I can do is help keep their car running. Most people would charge full price and not think twice about it." Marcus shrugged. "Most people don't know what it's like to choose between fixing your car and buying groceries." The morning progressed with the usual stream of customers, commuters, stopping for gas and coffee before heading to jobs in Cleveland or the smaller manufacturing plants scattered around the county. Marcus served each one with the same attention and care, whether they were buying a tank of gas or needed help with a mechanical problem. Around 10 o'clock, as the commuter rush was winding down, the sky began to darken with heavy clouds building. On the western horizon, Marcus stepped outside to check the weather, noting how the wind had picked up and the air pressure seemed to be dropping. "Looks like we're in for some weather," he called to Pete, who was restocking the beverage cooler. Radio said possible severe thunderstorms this afternoon. "You think we should get the emergency supplies ready?" Marcus nodded, knowing that severe storms often meant power outages and stranded motorists. He made sure they had fresh batteries for the flashlights, checked that the emergency radio was working, and verified that their small generator was fueled and ready to go. "You know, Pete, we should probably call Danny and see if he can come in early for his shift. If this storm is as bad as it looks like it might be, we could have a busy afternoon." Pete was already reaching for the phone. "Good thinking. That boy needs the extra hours anyway." As Pete made the call, Marcus stood in the doorway, watching the storm clouds build and feeling an odd sense of anticipation. In a few hours, those clouds would bring more than just rain and wind to Kowalski's Corner gas station. They would bring a chance encounter that would change everything. But for now, Marcus Rivera was just a gas station attendant getting ready for a storm, unaware that his life was about to take a turn that would reveal the true value of his hidden talents and show him that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as ordinary problems that need solving. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The storm arrived with the fury of nature unleashed. By 3 in the afternoon, the sky had turned an ominous green-black, and the wind was howling through the trees that lined Highway 23. Rain began as fat droplets that splattered against the station windows, quickly escalating to sheets of water that reduced visibility to mere yards. Marcus stood under the covered service area, watching the weather with growing concern. In his years working at the station, he had seen plenty of storms, but this one felt different. The air pressure was so low it made his ears pop, and the temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the past hour. Danny Walsh had arrived for his shift just before the worst of it hit, his beat-up Ford barely making it through the increasingly heavy downpour. The young man shook the water from his jacket as he hurried inside. "Holy cow, Marcus. It's like the world's ending out there. You think we'll lose power?" "Probably. Pete's already gone home to check on Sarah, so it's just us until this passes." Marcus gestured toward the emergency supplies they had prepared earlier. "We've got the generator ready if we need it, and enough supplies to help anyone who gets stranded." The lights flickered twice, then went out completely, plunging the station into the grey gloom of the storm. Marcus calmly started the generator, and the emergency lighting came on, casting everything in a harsh white glow. "What do we do now?" Danny asked, his voice betraying nervousness. "We wait, and we help whoever needs it. Storms like this bring out the best in people, but they also bring out folks who are scared and far from home." As if summoned by his words, headlights appeared through the rain, moving slowly along the highway. The vehicle pulled into the station, and Marcus could see it was unlike anything that normally stopped at Kowalski's Corner. Even through the rain and poor visibility, the car's sleek lines and distinctive silhouette marked it as something extraordinary. The engine made almost no sound as it came to a stop near the service bay, just a subtle electric hum that was barely audible over the storm. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out, immediately hunching against the driving rain. Eleanor Whitman was not dressed for a roadside emergency. Her tailored business suit and expensive shoes were completely inappropriate for the weather, and she moved with the careful steps of someone unaccustomed to navigating puddles and uneven pavement. Even soaked by the rain, she carried herself with an unmistakable air of authority. Marcus grabbed a large umbrella from behind the counter and hurried outside to meet her. "Ma'am, you need to get inside before you catch pneumonia," he called over. "The wind." Eleanor looked up at him with a mixture of relief and frustration. "Thank you. My car just died. The dashboard is showing all kinds of error messages, and nothing I try makes any difference." Marcus ushered her under the covered area and into the warmth of the station. Up close, he could see she was older than he had first thought, probably in her late 50s, with grey-streaked hair that had been pulled back in what was once a neat bun, but was now disheveled by the storm. "I'm Marcus Rivera. This is Danny." "Walsh, what seems to be the problem with your vehicle?" Eleanor accepted the towel Danny offered and began drying her hair. "I'm Eleanor Whitman." The car was running perfectly. Then suddenly every warning light on the dashboard came on at once. The motor just stopped, and now it won't respond to anything. Marcus looked through the rain at the vehicle. Even in the poor light, he could tell it was an electric car, probably a high-end model, given its advanced design and the materials visible in its construction. "When you say every warning light, what exactly do you mean?" "Battery, motor, charging system, thermal management, drivetrain, everything. I've never seen anything like it." Danny looked confused. "Thermal management? What kind of car is that?" Eleanor's expression shifted slightly, as if she was just realizing she might be in a place where her sophisticated vehicle was completely foreign. "It's an electric car. A prototype, actually. Very advanced." Marcus felt a familiar stirring of curiosity, the same feeling he got when presented with a complex engineering problem. Electric vehicles have different systems than traditional cars. The warning lights you're describing suggest either a catastrophic failure or a cascading system shutdown designed to prevent damage. Eleanor looked at him with surprise. "You know about electric vehicles?" Some. May I take a look?" "Do you have the proper diagnostic equipment?" "This isn't exactly a standard electric car. It uses very specialized components." There was no condescension in her voice, but Marcus detected the assumption that a small-town gas station wouldn't be equipped to handle sophisticated technology. He had encountered that attitude before, particularly in his previous career. "Let me grab some tools and we'll see what we can figure out." Marcus collected a basic toolkit and a digital multimeter, along with a heavy-duty flashlight. The three of them ventured back into the storm, with Eleanor directing him to where she had tried to activate various systems. The car's interior was unlike anything Marcus had seen in a commercial vehicle. The dashboard was dominated by a large touchscreen display that was currently showing a cascade of error messages in multiple languages. The seats were crafted from materials that looked more like they belonged in a spacecraft than an automobile. "This is definitely not a production model," Marcus observed. "Who manufactured it?" "My company. We're still in the development phase." Marcus examined the error messages, noting the technical terminology and diagnostic codes. Many were related to battery, thermal management and power distribution, systems that required sophisticated computer control to operate safely. The good news is that most electric vehicles are designed to shut down completely rather than risk damage when they detect a serious problem. The bad news is that diagnosing the root cause can be complicated without the right equipment. Eleanor's shoulders sagged slightly. So you can't help. I didn't say that. I said it was complicated. Marcus continued studying the display. These error codes are telling a story. We just need to read it carefully. He began tracing the electrical connections under the hood, using his flashlight to examine the high voltage components that powered the vehicle. The design was elegant and sophisticated, with multiple redundant systems and safety interlocks. Danny, can you get me the infrared thermometer from the shop? It's in the second drawer of the red toolbox. As Danny hurried back to the station, Marcus continued his examination. Eleanor watched him work, her initial skepticism beginning to give way to curiosity about his methodical approach. "You seem to know your way around electric systems," she observed. "I've always been interested in how things work. Electric vehicles are just another type of machine, with their own logic and design principles." Marcus located the main electrical distribution panel and carefully removed the cover, revealing a complex array of relays, fuses, and control modules. Everything appeared physically intact, with no signs of burning or damage. Danny returned with the thermometer, and Marcus began checking the temperatures of various components. Most were reading normal, but one particular module was showing significantly elevated heat levels. "There's your problem," Marcus said, pointing to the overheated component. "This is your battery management controller. It's running too hot, which means either it's working harder than it should be, or the cooling system isn't functioning properly." Eleanor leaned closer to see what he was indicating. "How can you tell?" "Heat signatures don't lie. This module should be running at ambient temperature or maybe a few degrees above. It's reading 40 degrees higher than everything around it." Marcus traced the cooling lines connected to the component, finding them bone dry. He followed the system back to its source, discovering a small leak in one of the coolant hoses that had allowed the specialized fluid to drain away slowly over time. Here's the root cause. This cooling hose has a small split in it. As the coolant leaked out, the battery management system started overheating. When it reached critical temperature, the safety systems shut everything down to prevent damage. Eleanor stared at the tiny crack in the hose, barely visible even with the flashlight shining directly on it. A leak that small caused all of this. Electric vehicle batteries generate significant heat during operation. Without proper cooling, the control systems will shut down the entire vehicle rather than risk a thermal runaway condition. Thermal runaway? When lithium batteries overheat, they can catch fire or even explode. The safety systems are designed to prevent that at all costs. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "So the car isn't broken, it's just protecting itself." "Exactly. The question is whether we can fix the leak and get you back on the road." Marcus examined the damaged hose more closely. It was a specialized high-temperature coolant line, not something that would be available at a typical auto parts store. However, the split was small and located in a section that didn't carry high pressure. "I might be able to make a temporary repair that would get you to a proper service facility. It won't be pretty, but it should hold long enough for you to reach, somewhere with the right parts." Eleanor looked around at the storm raging outside, then back at Marcus. "You would do that?" "That's what we're here for. Nobody should be stranded in weather like this if there's something we can do to help." Marcus returned to the shop and gathered several items. A small piece of high-temperature silicone hose, some marine-grade adhesive, and heat-shrink tubing. The repair would involve cutting out the damaged section and splicing in a replacement. Peace. Working carefully despite the rain and wind, Marcus made the repair, while Eleanor and Danny watched. His movements were precise and confident, showing the kind of expertise that came from years of solving complex problems under difficult conditions. "Where did you learn to work with electric vehicles?" Eleanor asked as he tested the integrity of his repair. I've always been interested in automotive technology. Electric systems follow the same basic principles as any other engineering challenge, just with different components. Marcus refilled the cooling system with distilled water, knowing it wasn't the proper coolant, but would serve as a temporary solution. He carefully checked for leaks, then began the process of resetting the vehicle's error codes. The tricky part is convincing the computer systems that everything is safe to restart. These cars have multiple levels of safety checks that all have to be satisfied before the motor will engage. He worked through a complex sequence of procedures, cycling various systems and monitoring their responses on the dashboard display. Gradually, the error messages began to clear, replaced by normal status indicators. "Try starting it now," Marcus instructed. Eleanor slid into the driver's seat and pressed the start button. The dashboard came alive with its normal displays and the subtle electric hum returned as the motor came online. "I can't believe it," she said, genuine amazement in her voice. "How did you know how to do all that?" Marcus closed the hood and gathered his tools. Every problem has a solution if you approach it systematically and pay attention to what the machine is trying to tell you. Thunder crashed overhead, followed immediately by a brilliant flash of lightning. The storm was reaching its peak intensity, with winds that made standing upright a challenge. "You can't drive in this weather," Marcus called over the wind. "The roads are flooded and visibility is zero. You should wait until it passes." Eleanor looked at the storm, then back at Marcus, her expression thoughtful. "I suppose I don't have much choice. How long do storms like this usually last?" "Another hour or two, probably. Come inside where it's warm and dry. We've got coffee and a place to sit until the weather clears." Inside the station, Eleanor settled into one of the plastic chairs near the coffee machine, while Marcus poured 3 cups of the strong brew that had been keeping him alert through the long day. The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and making conversation necessary over the constant drumming of rain on the metal roof. Danny busied himself organizing inventory, occasionally glancing at their unexpected guest with barely concealed curiosity. It wasn't often that someone wearing a suit that probably cost more than his monthly salary found themselves stranded at Kowalski's corner. "This coffee is actually quite good," Eleanor said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I was expecting something closer to motor oil," Marcus laughed. "Pete insists on buying the good stuff. Says life's too short for bad coffee, especially when you're working long hours." Pete is the owner, Pete Kowalski. His family's run this station for 3 generations. He took me on when I needed work, asked no questions about my background, and treated me with respect from day one. Eleanor detected something in Marcus's tone, a hint of gratitude that went deeper than simple employment. "That sounds like there's a story behind it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, listening to the storm. Through the windows they could see the rain coming down in torrents, turning the parking lot into a series of flowing streams. The generator hummed steadily, keeping their small island of warmth and light functioning in the midst of the chaos. "I used to be an automotive engineer," Marcus said finally. "Worked for a major manufacturer in Cleveland for 15 years. Specialized in powertrain design and fuel efficiency systems." Eleanor straightened slightly in her chair. "What happened?" "Company restructuring. They decided to move all engineering operations overseas, where labor was cheaper. Offered me a severance package and a recommendation letter, but no options for staying on in any capacity." "That must have been devastating." Marcus nodded, staring into his coffee. "I was 43 years old, with a sick mother, a mortgage, and skills that suddenly weren't in demand locally. Turns out there aren't many companies in Ohio looking for senior automotive engineers, especially ones without experience in electric vehicle technology." Eleanor felt a twinge of discomfort. Her own company had made similar decisions over the years, always justified by market pressures and shareholder demands. She had never really considered the human cost of those corporate strategies. "How long have you been working here?" 2 years. Took me 18 months to find any steady work at all. Used up my savings, lost the house, had to move in with my mother. Pete was the first person willing to give me a chance, even though I was overqualified for pumping gas. "But you clearly know far more about automotive systems than most mechanics. Why haven't you tried to start your own repair business?" Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Credits shot from the unemployment period. Can't get a business loan. Don't have the capital for equipment and tools. And honestly, after what happened in Cleveland, I'm not sure I trust my judgment about career decisions anymore." Eleanor studied his face, recognizing the self-doubt that came from professional rejection. She had seen it in other talented people who had been discarded by corporate decisions, and it always struck her as a terrible waste. "The way you diagnosed my car's problem, that wasn't basic mechanical knowledge. You understood the thermal management systems, the safety protocols, the diagnostic procedures. Where did you learn about electric vehicle technology?" "I've been studying it on my own time. Figured if electric vehicles are the future, I should understand how they work. Bought textbooks, watched online courses, read technical papers. Can't afford formal training, but the principles are similar to what I worked with before." Danny looked up from his inventory work. "Marcus has been teaching me about engines too, stuff they don't cover in high school auto shop." Eleanor turned to Marcus with renewed interest. "You're teaching?" "Just helping Danny understand how systems work together. And I mentor a local kid, Miguel Santos, help his family with car repairs. Knowledge isn't worth much if you don't share it." "That's a very generous attitude, especially given your own circumstances." Marcus shrugged. "These folks have been good to me. Danny's trying to save money for college, and Miguel's mother works 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. If I can help them avoid expensive repair bills, that's worth something." Thunder boomed overhead, followed by the distinctive crack of a tree falling somewhere nearby. The lights flickered but held steady, testament to the reliability of Pete's backup generator. "Tell me about your mother," Eleanor said gently. "You mentioned she's ill. Diabetes and heart problems. She worked in a textile factory for 30 years before it closed down. Never had great health insurance, and her medications are expensive. She raised me and my brother by herself after my father died in an industrial accident when I was 12. "Your brother?" "David. He's a teacher in California. Good man, but he's got his own family to support and student loans up to his eyebrows. We talk every week, but neither of us is in a position to help the other much financially." Eleanor absorbed this information, building a picture of a man who had been dealt several difficult hands, but continued to play them with dignity and care for others. It was a stark contrast to many of the executives and entrepreneurs she dealt with daily, people who viewed setbacks as temporary inconveniences rather than life-altering crises. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "What brings you to Ohio in a prototype? Electric car during a thunderstorm?" Eleanor's expression became more guarded. "Business meeting in Cleveland. I was heading back to Detroit when the weather caught up with me." "What kind of business?" "I run a technology company. We develop electric vehicle components and systems." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Then you definitely knew more about my repair than you let on. I wanted to see how you approached the problem. I was curious about your diagnostic methods." "Testing me?" Eleanor had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not intentionally, but yes, I suppose I was. I'm sorry about that. It was presumptuous. No offense taken. I'm used to people underestimating what a gas station attendant might know." Danny finished his inventory and joined them near the coffee machine. Outside, the wind was beginning to diminish slightly, though the rain continued to pour down steadily. Mr. Marcus, you want me to check the generator fuel level? We've been running it for a couple hours now. Good thinking, Danny. Top it off if it needs it, and check the oil while you're at it. As Danny headed outside to tend to the generator, Eleanor found herself alone with Marcus for the first time since arriving. The young man's departure seemed to create a more intimate atmosphere, encouraging deeper conversation. "I have to ask," Eleanor said, "with your background and obvious talent, why haven't you considered relocating to where there are more opportunities in automotive engineering?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the rain streak down the windows. "My mother can't travel. Her health is too fragile, and she needs regular medical care from doctors who know her case. Moving would mean leaving her behind, and I won't do that. There are no other family members who could help care for her. My uncle Roberto lives in Arizona, but he's got his own health problems. My cousin Elena is an engineer in California, but she's got young children and a demanding career. Mom raised me when I had nowhere else to go. Now it's my turn to take care of her." Eleanor felt a deep respect for his loyalty, even as she recognized the professional sacrifice it represented. "That's admirable, but it's also limiting your potential. Potential doesn't pay for insulin or heart medications. This job may not use all my skills, but it's steady work with decent people, and it keeps a roof over our heads." Before Eleanor could respond, an alarm began beeping from outside. Both of them looked toward the source of the sound, recognizing it as coming from Eleanor's car. "That's the thermal management system again," Marcus said, already reaching for his jacket. "The temporary repair may not be holding under these conditions." They hurried outside into the rain, with Marcus grabbing his tools on the way. The car's dashboard was once again showing warning lights, though not as many as before. "The cooling system is struggling," Marcus diagnosed after checking the display. "The temporary hose repair is holding, but the water I used isn't providing adequate cooling performance. We need proper coolant, or the system will shut down again." Eleanor looked worried. "Is there anywhere to get the right coolant around here?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Carlos at the auto parts store might have something that would work, but he closed hours ago because of the storm. However, I might have another solution." He led her to a storage area behind the station where Pete kept supplies for emergency situations. After digging through several boxes, Marcus emerged with a container of high-performance coolant designed for racing applications. "This is military-grade stuff that Pete keeps for extreme situations. It's designed to handle much higher temperatures than standard coolant. If we drain the water and replace it with this, your cooling system should function normally. Won't that be expensive to replace?" Marcus was already heading back to the car with the coolant. "Pete won't mind. He's helped plenty of stranded motorists over the years. Besides, it's just sitting here gathering dust." Working efficiently despite the rain, Marcus drained the cooling system and refilled it with the high-performance coolant. The process required several cycles to eliminate air bubbles and ensure proper circulation. "This should solve the overheating problem permanently," he said as he reset the system warnings. "Though you'll still want to get that hose replaced with the proper part when you reach a qualified service center." Eleanor started the car again, and this time the dashboard remained clear of warning lights. The electric motor hummed smoothly, and all systems showed normal operating parameters. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've gone far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. It's what neighbors do for each other." "I'm hardly a neighbor," Marcus looked at her seriously. "Anyone who needs help is a neighbor. That's how my mother raised me, and it's how Pete runs this place." Eleanor found herself deeply moved by his simple philosophy. In her world of corporate competition and strategic positioning, such straightforward human decency was rare and valuable. Danny returned from checking the generator, shaking water from his jacket. "Fuel's good for another 6 hours if we need it. Storm's starting to let up a little, though." Indeed, the wind had diminished significantly, and the rain was becoming less torrential. Through breaks in the clouds, they could occasionally see patches of lighter sky. "I should probably think about getting back on the road soon," Eleanor said, though she seemed reluctant to leave. "Roads might still be flooded," Marcus warned. "Even if the rain stops, it takes time for the water to drain off Highway 23. You might want to wait another hour to be safe." Eleanor nodded, secretly relieved to have more time in this unexpected sanctuary. She was learning more about human resilience and dignity in one afternoon than she had in months of boardroom meetings and corporate conferences. The storm continued to weaken as the three of them returned inside, and Eleanor found herself genuinely reluctant to end what had become the most enlightening conversation she'd had in months. She settled back into her chair, cradling her coffee cup, and studying Marcus with new appreciation for his depth of knowledge. "I have to admit," Eleanor said, "your approach to diagnosing the cooling system problem was more systematic than what I've seen from some of our certified technicians." Marcus looked surprised. "Your company has certified technicians for electric vehicles?" "We have to. When you're developing cutting-edge technology, you need people who understand every component and system interaction. Unfortunately, finding qualified technicians has been one of our biggest challenges." "What kind of technology does your company focus on?" Eleanor hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "We manufacture electric vehicle powertrains and battery management systems. The car you repaired is one of our latest prototypes, designed for extreme performance applications." Danny looked up from wiping down the counter. "Like race cars?" "Among other things. We're working on technology that could revolutionize commercial transportation, emergency vehicles, long-haul trucking. The applications are virtually limitless if we can solve the current technical limitations." Marcus leaned forward with interest. "What limitations?" "Battery thermal management is the biggest one. Current systems work well under normal conditions, but extreme temperatures, rapid charging, or sustained high-performance operation can cause dangerous overheating. We need more sophisticated cooling solutions. What about using phase change materials instead of liquid coolants?" Eleanor blinked, clearly not expecting such a technically sophisticated question from a gas station attendant. "Phase change materials?" "Substances that absorb large amounts of heat when they change from solid to liquid, then release that heat when they solidify again. They could provide more efficient thermal buffering than traditional cooling systems. We've looked at that approach, but the engineering challenges are significant. Weight, space requirements, life cycle management." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What if you integrated the phase change material directly into the battery housing? Structure? Use it as both thermal management and structural support. Might solve the weight and space issues simultaneously." Eleanor stared at him. "That's actually brilliant. We hadn't considered a structural integration approach. It would require sophisticated modeling to optimize the thermal distribution patterns, but the basic concept is sound. You could potentially reduce system weight while improving thermal performance." Danny watched the exchange with growing amazement. He had always known Marcus was smart, but this level of technical discussion was revealing depths he hadn't suspected. "Marcus, where did you learn about phase change materials?" "MIT has some excellent online engineering courses. I've been working through their materials science curriculum in my spare time. Can't afford to actually enroll, but the lecture videos are freely available." Eleanor felt a growing sense of excitement mixed with disbelief. "You're self-teaching advanced materials?" "Science, among other things. Thermodynamics, advanced electrical systems, computer modeling techniques. The automotive industry is changing so rapidly that traditional knowledge becomes obsolete quickly. You have to keep learning or get left behind. And you're doing this while working full-time and caring for your mother. Early mornings mostly, and late evenings when Mum's asleep. The local library has decent internet access, and I can usually get a few hours of study time before my shift starts. Eleanor shook her head in wonder. Most of our engineers with advanced degrees don't show that level of intellectual curiosity or self-motivation. When you're trying to claw your way back from rock bottom, you learn to use every resource available. The conversation was interrupted by a low, rumbling sound from outside. Danny went to the window to investigate and saw a large truck struggling through the standing water on Highway 23. "Looks like Big Jim's coming back," Danny announced. "Sure." Enough. The 18-wheeler pulled into the station, and Big Jim climbed down from the cab, his expression grim. He splashed through the puddles and pushed through the door, nodding to Eleanor before addressing Marcus. "Got a problem, Marcus? That vacuum line fix you did this morning was perfect, but now I'm getting a different issue. Engine's running rough again, but it's a different kind of rough." Marcus grabbed his jacket and tools. "Let's take a look." Eleanor followed them outside, curious to observe Marcus's diagnostic approach with a different type of vehicle. The diesel engine was indeed running unevenly, with a noticeable vibration that hadn't been present earlier. Marcus listened carefully to the engine, moving around the truck to assess the sound from different angles. After a few minutes, he opened the hood and began checking various components. "When did this start?" he asked Big Jim. "About 50 miles back. Got worse as I kept driving." Marcus examined the fuel system components, checking filters and lines. Everything appeared normal until he reached the fuel injection system. "Danny, hand me that stethoscope from the toolkit." Danny looked confused. "Stethoscope? Mechanic stethoscope. It's in the red case." Eleanor watched with fascination as Marcus used the specialized tool to listen to individual fuel injectors. His methodical approach reminded her of the diagnostic protocols her own engineers used, but with an intuitive element that suggested deep, practical experience. "Found it!" Marcus announced after checking the 6th injector. "Number 4 fuel injector is misfiring. The solenoid is sticking, causing inconsistent fuel delivery." Big Jim frowned. "That's going to be expensive to fix." "Not necessarily. Sometimes these injectors just need cleaning. The electrical signal is reaching the solenoid, but carbon buildup can prevent proper operation." Marcus retrieved a bottle of specialized fuel injector cleaner from Pete's Supplies and added it to Big Jim's fuel tank. "Run the engine for a few minutes to circulate the cleaner through the system. If it's just carbon buildup, this should solve the problem. If the injector is mechanically damaged, you'll need a replacement. But we won't know until we try the simple solution first." Big Jim started the engine and let it idle. Within minutes, the rough running began to smooth out as the cleaner worked its way through the fuel system. "I'll be damned," Big Jim said with a grin. "You did it again. How much do I owe you for the cleaner? On the house. You've been a good customer for years." As Big Jim drove away with his truck running smoothly, Eleanor turned to Marcus with obvious admiration. "That was impressive. You diagnosed a complex fuel system problem in minutes using basic tools and solved it with a $10 bottle of cleaner. Experience teaches you to try simple solutions before assuming complex problems. Most mechanical issues have straightforward causes if you know what to look for." That's exactly the kind of diagnostic thinking we need in electric vehicle development. The principles are the same, even if the components are different. They returned inside as the last of the storm clouds moved eastward, leaving behind a sky that was beginning to show patches of blue. The air had a fresh, washed quality that made breathing feel cleaner and easier. Eleanor checked her phone and saw several missed calls and text messages. "I should probably contact my office. They're expecting me back tonight." As she stepped aside to make her calls, Marcus and Danny began cleaning up from the storm and preparing to reopen the station for normal operations. The generator continued, to run, but power to the main building would likely be restored within a few hours. "Marcus," Danny said quietly, "that lady seems really impressed with you. Think she might offer you a job or something?" "People like Eleanor Whitman don't offer jobs to people like me, Danny. We come from different worlds." "Maybe, but she's been asking a lot of technical questions, and you've been answering them better than most college professors could." Marcus continued organizing tools, but Danny's words stuck with him. Eleanor's questions had been probing and specific, suggesting more than casual curiosity about his knowledge and capabilities. Eleanor finished her phone calls and returned to where Marcus was working. "My office is concerned about the prototype, but I assured them it's been properly repaired. I told them I encountered a very skilled technician who solved the problem efficiently. I hope the temporary repair holds until you can get the proper parts. About that, I'd like to have my head engineer take a look at your repair work. Would you be willing to document what you did? Photos, part specifications, that sort of thing?" Marcus looked puzzled. "Why would your engineer care about a temporary field repair?" "Because sometimes the best innovations come from necessity and practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Your approach might have applications we haven't considered. I can put together some notes if you think it would be helpful." Eleanor pulled out a business card and handed it to him. "This has my direct contact information. I'd appreciate anything you can send me about the repair process." Marcus looked at the card, noting the company logo and Eleanor's title, CEO and Chief Technology Officer. "You're the CEO? Guilty as charged. Does that change anything? It explains why you know so much about electric vehicle technology. It also explains why I recognize exceptional talent when I see it." Eleanor's tone became more serious. "Marcus, I've spent the last few hours watching you solve complex technical problems with limited resources and outdated equipment. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking and practical expertise that our industry desperately needs." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I appreciate the compliment, but I'm just a mechanic trying to help people with their car problems. You're far more than that, and we both know it. The question is what you're going to do with your abilities." Danny had been listening to the exchange with growing excitement. "Mr. Marcus, maybe this is the opportunity you've been waiting for." "Opportunities like this don't happen to people in my situation, Danny." Eleanor studied Marcus's face, recognizing the self-doubt and defensive posture that came from repeated disappointment. She had seen it before in talented people who had been beaten down by circumstances beyond their control. "What if I told you that our company is expanding operations and looking for senior engineers with practical experience? Would you at least be willing to discuss the possibility?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, torn between hope and the fear of another crushing disappointment. "I appreciate the offer, but I have responsibilities here. My mother needs care, and Pete depends on me to keep this place running. Those are real concerns that would need to be addressed, but they're not insurmountable obstacles if you're open to creative solutions." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see Pete's pickup truck, followed by a county sheriff's cruiser, both navigating carefully through the standing water. Pete hurried inside, his relief evident when he saw that everyone was safe and the station was still functioning. "Thank God you're all okay. We lost power at the house, and Sarah was worried sick about you boys. Roads are a mess, but they're starting to clear." Officer Dave Martinez followed Pete inside, nodding to the group. "Just checking on everyone after the storm. Got reports of trees down and flooding, but it looks like you folks weathered it fine." "We had some help," Pete said, gesturing toward Eleanor. "This lady's car broke down right as the worst of it hit." Officer Martinez looked at Eleanor with professional interest. "You need any assistance, ma'am?" Roads are still dangerous in some areas. Actually, Marcus here got my car running again. I was just preparing to head back to Detroit. Detroit? That's a long drive in these conditions. You might want to consider staying local tonight and leaving in the morning when the roads are completely clear. Eleanor looked at Marcus, then back at the officer. Is there a decent hotel nearby? Millbrook Inn is about 10 minutes east of here. Clean rooms, good restaurant, family-owned place that's been serving travelers for 40 years. Eleanor made her decision. I think that's wise advice. It's been a long day, and driving in poor conditions would be unnecessarily risky. She turned to Marcus with a meaningful look. Perhaps we could continue our conversation over dinner. I'd like to hear more about your ideas for thermal management systems. Marcus felt the weight of possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. I suppose that would be all right, if Pete doesn't mind closing up without me. Go ahead, Marcus. You've earned a good meal after dealing with this storm. Danny and I can handle things here. As Eleanor gathered her belongings and prepared to follow Officer Martinez's directions to the hotel, she handed Marcus another business card. This one has my personal cell phone number. Call me when you're ready for dinner. We have a lot more to discuss. The Millbrook Inn sat at the edge of town like a piece of Americana frozen in time, its red brick facade and white colonial columns speaking to an era when travelers moved more slowly and valued comfort over speed. Marcus arrived at 7 o'clock. Having stopped at home to shower and change into his one good shirt and tie, clothes he hadn't worn since his last job interview 2 years ago. Eleanor was waiting in the inn's dining room, having traded her storm-damaged business suit for a simple but elegant dress that made her appear more approachable than the corporate executive he had met that afternoon. She had chosen a corner table that offered privacy for conversation while overlooking the inn's garden, where the recent rain had left everything glistening in the early evening light. I took the liberty of ordering coffee, Eleanor said, as Marcus joined her. I figured after the day we've had, we could both use the caffeine. Thank you. This is quite a change from the gas station. The inn has a good reputation. I did some research while I was getting settled. Family-owned for 3 generations, known for honest food and fair prices. Reminds me of your friend Pete's philosophy. Marcus looked around the dining room, noting the mixture of local families and travelers, the comfortable but well-maintained furnishings, the sense of community that permeated the space. Places like this are becoming rare. Most of the family businesses in Millbrook have closed over the past decade. Economic pressures, mostly. Walmart moved in 15 years ago, killed half the downtown shops. Then the textile factory closed. Took away 800 jobs. Young people leave for college and don't come back because there's nothing here for them. Eleanor studied his face as he spoke, hearing the affection and concern in his voice. But you stayed. I came back. Left. For college, then my engineering job in Cleveland. But when Mom got sick and I lost my position, coming home was the only option that made sense. Their waitress, a middle-aged woman named Susan, approached with menus and a warm smile. Evening, Marcus. Haven't seen you in here for a while? Hi, Susan. This is Eleanor Whitman. She's visiting from Detroit. Welcome to Millbrook, honey. I hope Marcus has been showing you our famous hospitality. He certainly has. He rescued me from the storm and got my car running again. Susan beamed with obvious pride. That's our Marcus, always ready to help folks in need. What can I get you two to drink besides coffee? They ordered their meals, and as Susan departed, Eleanor leaned forward with genuine curiosity. She knows you well. Small town. Susan's worked here since I was in high school. Her daughter was in my graduating class. Do you ever feel trapped by that familiarity? Everyone knowing your business, your history? Marcus considered the question carefully. Sometimes, but there's also comfort in it. When I lost my job and had to move back in with Mom, people here didn't judge me or treat me differently. They just offered help where they could and let me rebuild my dignity in my own time. That's remarkable. In my world, professional failure tends to make people disappear from social circles pretty quickly. What is your world like? Running a technology company must be demanding. Eleanor's expression became more guarded, intense, competitive, always looking toward the next innovation, the next market opportunity. It can be rewarding but also isolating. How did you get into electric vehicle technology? My late husband, Robert, was an electrical engineer who believed that transportation would eventually become completely electrified. He started the company 20 years ago with a small team and big dreams. Marcus detected the careful way she spoke about her husband. He's no longer involved with the company. Robert died 3 years ago, heart attack at 55. He had been working 18-hour days trying to solve a critical battery safety problem, and the stress finally caught up with him. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. His death forced me to take over the company at a time when I wasn't sure I was qualified. I had been handling the business side while he focused on engineering, but suddenly I was responsible for both. That must have been overwhelming. Eleanor nodded, stirring her coffee absently. Terrifying, actually. We had major contracts dependent on solving the same technical problems that had killed my husband, literally. I had to learn advanced engineering concepts while grieving and trying to keep the company from collapsing. But you succeeded. We survived, then grew. But I learned something important in the process. The best innovations often come from people who approach problems differently, who aren't constrained by conventional thinking. Susan returned with their meals, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was excellent, hearty American fare prepared with obvious care and attention to quality. This reminds me of meals my mother used to cook when I was young, Eleanor said, before life became so complicated. Mom still cooks like this, says food prepared with love tastes better than anything from a fancy restaurant. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. Raised 2 boys on her own after Dad died, worked double shifts at the factory, never missed a school event or game. Everything I know about perseverance and integrity came from watching her. Eleanor set down her fork and looked at Marcus directly. I want to offer you a position with my company. Marcus had been expecting this moment since their technical discussions at the gas station, but hearing it stated so directly still caught him off guard. What kind of position? Senior engineer in our thermal management division. You'd be working on exactly the kind of problems we discussed today, developing next generation cooling systems for electric vehicles. Eleanor, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have a degree in electrical engineering or experience with electric vehicle manufacturing. You have something more valuable, the ability to see solutions that others miss. Your approach to diagnosing my car's problem, your ideas about phase change materials, your systematic thinking process, those skills can't be taught in textbooks. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. What would something like that involve? Relocating to Detroit initially, though we're expanding operations and looking at new facility locations. Competitive salary, full benefits, research budget for pursuing innovative solutions. Most importantly, the opportunity to work on technology that could revolutionize transportation. And my mother. We could arrange for her medical care to be transferred to specialists in Detroit. The company health plan would cover her medications and treatments. Marcus shook his head slowly. She's never lived anywhere but Millbrook. At her age and with her health problems, moving would be traumatic, possibly dangerous. Then we find another solution. What do you mean? Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes bright with possibility. What if instead of bringing you to Detroit, we brought the work to Millbrook? I don't understand. We've been considering establishing a satellite facility for research and development, somewhere with lower operating costs than Detroit, but with access to skilled workers and good transportation infrastructure. Marcus stared at her. You're talking about opening a facility here? Why not? Millbrook has available industrial space. From the closed factories, a workforce that needs employment, and apparently at least one exceptional engineer. The economics could work if we structure it properly. Eleanor, that's incredibly generous, but you can't make major business decisions based on wanting to help one person. I'm not. I'm making a business decision based on recognizing exceptional talent and finding creative ways to access it. The fact that it could help revitalize a struggling community is a bonus. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what she was suggesting. You're talking about potentially hundreds of jobs, millions of dollars in investment, that level of commitment based on one afternoon? Based on watching you solve complex problems with limited resources, demonstrate innovative thinking under pressure, and show genuine care for your community. Those are exactly the qualities we need to drive innovation. Susan appeared to refill their coffee cups, and Eleanor waited until she had moved away before continuing. I'm not asking you to decide tonight, Marcus, but I am asking you to seriously consider the possibility. Think about what you could accomplish with proper resources and support. What about Pete? He depends on me to keep the station running. Pete's been in business for decades. I'm sure he could find another capable employee. Besides, if we establish a facility here, the economic impact could benefit his business as well. Marcus looked out the window at the quiet streets of Millbrook, imagining them bustling with workers heading to and from a modern manufacturing facility. It seemed almost impossible to believe. How would something like this work practically? We'd start small, a research and development facility focused on thermal management systems, maybe 20 or 30 employees initially, growing as projects. Develop. We'd hire locally when possible, provide training for specialized skills. And you'd want me to lead this operation? Eventually, yes. You'd need some time to familiarize yourself with our systems and procedures, but the goal would be for you to manage the technical aspects of the facility. Marcus felt the weight of possibility and responsibility in equal measure. This is far beyond anything I ever imagined. The best opportunities usually are. They require us to expand our vision of what's possible. What's the next step? Eleanor pulled out her phone and showed him a calendar. I'd like you to visit our Detroit facility next week. Meet our engineering team, see our current projects, get a feel for the work we're doing. Travel expenses paid, of course. I'd have to arrange coverage at the station. Of course. Think about it over the weekend and let me know Monday. They finished their meal in contemplative silence, both lost in thoughts about the possibilities they had been discussing. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor placed her hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus, I want you to understand something. This isn't charity, and it's not some impulse decision. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking and problem-solving ability that our industry needs. The question is whether you're ready to take the risk of believing in yourself again. Outside the inn, under a clear, star-filled sky that had emerged after the storm, Marcus walked Eleanor to her car. The electric vehicle hummed quietly to life, its systems functioning perfectly after his afternoon repair. The car's running smoothly, Eleanor observed. Your repair work was excellent. Thank you. Drive carefully on the way back to your hotel. I will. And Marcus, whatever you decide, today has been one of the most interesting and encouraging days I've had in years. You've reminded me why I love engineering and innovation. As Eleanor drove away, Marcus stood in the parking lot for several minutes, looking up at the stars and trying to process everything that had happened. 12 hours. Ago, he had been a gas station attendant with a routine life and predictable future. Now he was considering an opportunity that could transform not just his own circumstances, but potentially the entire economic future of his community. The drive home took him past familiar landmarks. The high school where he had first learned to love mathematics and science, the factory where his mother had worked for 30 years, the small house on Maple Street where she waited for him with evening medication and stories about her day. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but Marcus knew that something fundamental had shifted. Eleanor Whitman had offered him a chance to reclaim his professional identity and use his skills for meaningful work. More importantly, she had shown him that his talents had value beyond what he had allowed himself to believe. The question now was whether he had the courage to accept the risk of hope. Marcus found his mother waiting up for him in the small living room of their house on Maple Street, despite the late hour. Carmen Rivera sat in her favorite armchair with a cup of herbal tea, her evening medications arranged on the side table beside her. At 72, she retained the sharp intelligence and strong will that had carried her through decades of single parenthood and factory work. "How was dinner, mijo?" she asked as Marcus settled onto the worn sofa across from her. "Complicated." Marcus looked around the room that had been his childhood home, noting the family photographs that chronicled better times, the religious icons that reflected his mother's faith, the carefully maintained furniture that spoke to her pride despite their limited means. The lady with the fancy car, Eleanor Whitman. She owns a technology company in Detroit. Carmen studied her son's face with the perceptive gaze of a mother who had learned to read his moods through 4 decades of shared experiences. She offered you a job. It wasn't a question. Carmen had always possessed an uncanny ability to understand situations before they were fully explained to her. "How did you know?" "You have the same look you had when you got accepted to engineering school, excited and terrified at the same time." Marcus smiled, despite the weight of his thoughts. "You know me too well." "Tell me about this job," Marcus explained. The conversation with Eleanor, carefully describing both the opportunities and the challenges. Carmen listened without interruption, her expression growing more thoughtful as he detailed the possibility of bringing the facility to Millbrook. "She wants to build a factory here?" Carmen asked when he finished. "A research facility. It could grow into something larger if the work goes well." "And you would run this facility?" "Eventually. I'd need training first, time to learn their systems and procedures." Carmen was quiet for several minutes, sipping her tea and processing the implications. Marcus waited patiently, knowing that his mother's counsel had always been worth the time it took her to formulate her thoughts. "What are you afraid of?" she finally asked. "Everything. Failing again. Leaving you without proper care. Disappointing. People who believe in me. Taking a risk that could make our situation worse instead of better. And what are you hoping for?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "The chance to use my mind for something meaningful again. To prove that what happened in Cleveland wasn't the end of my career. To maybe help this community find a future. Those are good hopes, mijo. Worth some risk. But what about your medical care? The doctors who know your case history?" Carmen leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. "Marcus, I am 72 years old. I have lived through the death of my husband, raised 2 sons alone, worked 30 years in a factory, and survived more changes than you can imagine. You think I cannot handle learning to work with new doctors? Mom, it's not that simple. Your diabetes, your heart condition, the medications you need, medical records can be transferred. Doctors can learn my case. What cannot be transferred or learned is the opportunity you have right now." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the weight of responsibility that had shaped every major decision of his adult life. "I can't ask you to uproot your entire Life for my career. You are not asking. I am telling you that your future is more important than my comfort. That's not how it works, Mom. Family takes care of family. Carmen set down her teacup with more force than necessary, a sign that her patience was wearing thin. Marcus Rivera, you listen to me. I did not work 60-hour weeks and sacrifice everything I wanted so that you could spend your life limiting yourself out of misguided loyalty. Mom, no, let me finish. You think caring for me means keeping your life small enough to fit around my needs. That is not love, mijo. That is fear disguised as duty. Marcus was taken aback by the intensity of her response. I'm not afraid. You are terrified. Terrified of success as much as failure. Terrified that if you reach for something big, it might be taken away like it was before. Carmen struggled to her feet and moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street where she had lived for over 20 years. This community raised you, gave you values and strength, but it was never meant to be a cage. I'm not caged here. Then, improve it. Take this woman's offer seriously. Visit her company. See what possibilities exist beyond pumping gas and fixing leaky hoses. Marcus joined her at the window, seeing the familiar neighborhood through her eyes. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough for this level of work? Then you fail with dignity and learn something in the process. But what if you succeed? What if you are exactly as talented as this woman believes you are? They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, mother and son contemplating a future neither had imagined possible 24 hours earlier. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. She mentioned bringing operations to Millbrook. Jobs for local people, economic development for the community. Carmen turned to look at him directly. You would be responsible for that. Partially. If the facility succeeds, it could hire dozens of people, maybe more eventually. People like Miguel Santos, Danny Walsh, young folks who leave because there is nothing here for them. Potentially. Carmen nodded slowly. Then this is not just about your career. This is about the future of our community. The weight of that realization settled over Marcus like a blanket. The decision he was contemplating could affect not just his own life, but the lives of everyone in Millbrook who was struggling to find opportunity in a town that had been slowly dying for 2 decades. No pressure, he said with a weak smile. Pressure is what creates diamonds, mijo. The next morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp October air that made everything seem possible. Marcus arrived at the gas station early, finding Pete already there with a pot of fresh coffee and a concerned expression. Danny told me about your visitor yesterday, Pete said without preamble. Said she seemed mighty interested in your skills. Word travels fast. Small town. Susan from the inn called her sister, who called her neighbor, who called my Sarah. By now, half of Millbrook knows you had dinner with a rich lady from Detroit. Marcus poured himself coffee and settled behind the counter. What are people saying? Mostly that it's about time someone recognized what you can do. Few folks wondering if you're planning to leave us. I don't know what I'm planning, Pete. The whole situation is overwhelming. Pete studied Marcus with the shrewd gaze of a man who had been reading people for 60 years. Want to talk about it? Marcus found himself describing the previous day's events in detail, from Eleanor's breakdown to the dinner conversation and job offer. Pete listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the information. So, she wants to bring you to Detroit to work for her company, Pete summarized when Marcus finished. More than that, she's talking about potentially establishing a facility here in Millbrook, using it as a base for research and development. Pete's eyebrows rose. Here, in Millbrook? I know it sounds impossible. Sounds like exactly what this Town needs. Question is whether you're ready for that kind of responsibility. Before Marcus could respond, the bell chimed and Miguel Santos entered, his school backpack slung over his shoulder. The teenager looked uncharacteristically serious as he approached the counter. "Mr. Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" Miguel glanced at Pete, who took the hint and moved to the other side of the store to give them privacy. "My mom heard about the job offer. She wanted me to ask you something." "What's that?" "If you leave Millbrook, could I still learn from you? About engines and mechanical things?" Marcus felt a pang of guilt at the thought of abandoning his informal mentorship of Miguel. The young man had shown real aptitude for mechanical work, and Marcus had been helping him develop skills that could lead to a good career. "Miguel, if I were to leave, there are other people who could teach you." "Not like you do. You explain things so they make sense, and you don't make me feel stupid for asking questions." "You're not stupid. You're one of the brightest kids I know." Miguel kicked at the floor with his shoe. "Mom says maybe if you get a good job, you could help other people get good jobs too." "What do you mean?" "Like if that lady builds a factory here, maybe there would be work for people like Mom. Real work that pays enough to live on." Marcus realized that Miguel understood the broader implications of Eleanor's offer better than he had given the teenager credit for. The possibility of economic development wasn't just abstract to Miguel. It represented hope for his family's future. "Would you be interested in that kind of work? Engineering and manufacturing?" Miguel's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Are you kidding? Working with real technology, building things that matter, that would be incredible. It would require education beyond high school. Technical training, maybe college. I could do that if there was a reason to do it, a future worth working toward." Marcus saw himself at 17 in Miguel's eager expression, full of dreams and ambition before life had taught him to limit his expectations. The conversation crystallized something important. This decision wasn't just about his own career redemption, but about creating opportunities for the next generation. "Miguel, regardless of what I decide, you should pursue that. Education. Promise me you won't let anything limit your ambitions." "I promise, but I hope you don't limit yours either." After Miguel left for school, Marcus found himself alone with Pete and the weight of multiple people's hopes and expectations. "That boy looks up to you," Pete observed. "He reminds me of myself at that age, full of possibilities." "What happened to those possibilities, Marcus?" "Life, setbacks, the realization that the world doesn't owe you success just because you work hard and try to do the right thing." Pete was quiet for a moment, organizing receipts and avoiding eye contact. "You know, I've been thinking about retiring," Marcus looked up in surprise. "Pete, you love this place?" "I do, but I'm 72 years old, and my arthritis is getting worse every year. Sarah and I have been talking about maybe selling the station and moving closer to our daughter in Florida." "You never mentioned that before." "Didn't want to worry you when you were already dealing with enough, but if you're considering other opportunities, maybe it's time for both of us to think about new directions." Marcus felt another layer of complexity added to his decision. If Pete was planning to retire anyway, his obligation to stay and help run the station became less pressing. "Have you talked to potential buyers?" "A couple of chains have expressed interest over the years. Nothing immediate, but the option is there." They were interrupted by the arrival of the mail carrier, who brought with her the usual collection of bills and advertisements. Among the mail was a package addressed to Marcus, sent overnight delivery from Eleanor's company in Detroit. Inside, Marcus found a detailed information packet about Eleanor's company, including technical specifications for their current projects, employee benefit summaries, and a formal job description for the position she had discussed. There was also a handwritten note from Eleanor reiterating her interest in having him visit the facility. Pete looked over his shoulder as Marcus reviewed the materials. Impressive operation. Very. They're working on some fascinating projects. Sounds like you're interested. Marcus closed the packet and looked at Pete directly. I think I am. That scares me. Fear is just excitement without breath. Take a deep breath and see what it feels like. That evening, Marcus called his brother David. In California, David was 3 years younger and had followed a more traditional path, becoming a high school mathematics teacher and raising 2 children with his wife Maria. The brothers spoke weekly, but this conversation felt different from their usual. Check-ins, a job offer? David said after Marcus explained the situation. Marcus, that's fantastic news. It's complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated. Tell me about this woman and her company. Marcus described Eleanor and their conversation in detail, including the possibility of bringing operations to Millbrook. David listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions about technical aspects or business details. So she's offering you a chance to essentially start over professionally with better resources and support than you've ever had. That's one way to look at it. What's the other way? She's asking me to take a huge risk based on one afternoon's conversation to uproot my life and Mom's for something that might not work out. David was quiet for a moment. Marcus, can I tell you something as your brother? Of course, you've been punishing yourself for what happened in Cleveland for 2 years, acting like professional failure is some kind of moral failure, like you deserved what happened to you. Marcus felt defensive. I'm not punishing myself. I'm being realistic about my situation. You're being afraid. And I understand why, but it's not serving you anymore. What if I'm not good enough? What if I've been out of real engineering work too long? Then you figure it out as you go. You're one of the smartest people I know, Marcus. This woman didn't offer you a job out of pity. She recognized something valuable. And if it doesn't work out, then you'll have tried something meaningful instead of settling for less than you're capable of. After talking with David, Marcus sat in his small bedroom and carefully reviewed all the materials Eleanor had sent. The technical challenges her company was working on were exactly the kind of problems that had always excited him as an engineer. The opportunity to contribute to meaningful innovation was something he had thought was lost forever. By midnight, he had made his decision. He would visit Eleanor's facility in Detroit and seriously explore the possibilities she had outlined. The risk was real, but so was the potential for transformation, not just for himself, but for his entire community. Marcus reached for his phone and composed a text message to Eleanor. I would like to visit your facility next week. When would be convenient? Her response came within minutes. Excellent news. How is Tuesday? I'll arrange everything. As Marcus prepared for bed, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine excitement about his professional future. Tomorrow he would have to make arrangements with Pete for time off, discuss the trip with his mother, and begin preparing for what could be the most important few days of his life. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Marcus Rivera allowed himself to believe that his story might have a very different ending than he had imagined. Tuesday morning found Marcus standing outside the gleaming headquarters of Whitman Technologies in Detroit, a modern glass and steel structure that seemed to reach toward the sky with the same ambition that had built the automotive industry a century earlier. He wore his best suit, a navy blue outfit that had served him well during his engineering career, but now felt foreign after 2 years of coveralls and work shirts. Eleanor met him in the lobby personally, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the security staff and receptionists who clearly weren't accustomed to seeing the CEO greeting visitors herself. Marcus, welcome to Whitman Technologies. I'm excited to show you what we're building here. The facility tour began in the main engineering department, where dozens of engineers worked at sophisticated computer workstations, designing the next generation of electric vehicle components. The energy in the room was palpable, with teams collaborating on complex problems and testing innovative solutions. Dr. Amanda Wilson, Eleanor's chief engineer, joined them as they moved through the various departments. She was a thoughtful woman in her late 30s who clearly commanded respect from her colleagues and possessed the kind of technical expertise that had made Eleanor's company a leader in the field. Marcus, Eleanor tells me you have some interesting ideas about thermal management systems, Amanda said as they approached a testing area where prototype battery packs were being subjected to various stress tests. I've been thinking about ways to improve efficiency while reducing weight and complexity, Marcus replied, studying the equipment with obvious interest. Show him the overheating problem we've been wrestling with, Eleanor suggested. Amanda led them to a workstation where a sophisticated computer model displayed the thermal characteristics of a high-performance battery pack. The visualization showed dangerous heat concentrations that could lead to system failures under extreme operating conditions. We're trying to develop a cooling solution for emergency vehicle applications, Amanda explained. Ambulances, fire trucks, police cars that need sustained high-performance operation under demanding conditions. Marcus studied the thermal model for several minutes, asking detailed questions about power requirements, space constraints, and operating environments. His questions demonstrated a deep understanding of both the technical challenges and the practical requirements of emergency vehicle operations. What if you approach this as a distributed cooling problem instead of a centralized one? Marcus suggested. Instead of trying to cool the entire battery pack uniformly, you could create thermal zones with different cooling strategies optimized for each zone's specific heat generation patterns. Amanda looked intrigued. Elaborate on that. Marcus moved to the workstation and began sketching his concept on a digital tablet. His design showed a battery pack divided into multiple thermal zones, each with cooling systems optimized for their specific heat loads and operational requirements. High-drain cells would get active liquid cooling, while cells with lower heat generation could use passive cooling with phase-change materials. The control system would dynamically adjust cooling intensity based on real-time demand. Dr. Wilson studied the sketch with growing excitement. That could work. We've been thinking about this as a single system problem, but you're right that different zones have different needs. The beauty is that it would be more reliable than a single centralized system, Marcus continued. If one zone's cooling fails, the others continue operating, providing redundancy for critical applications. Eleanor watched the interaction with satisfaction. Marcus was demonstrating exactly the kind of innovative thinking that her company needed, approaching familiar problems from fresh perspectives. Amanda, how long would it take to model Marcus's concept? Give me an hour with the simulation software. This could be exactly the breakthrough we've been looking for. As Amanda began working on the thermal model, Eleanor took Marcus to meet other members of the engineering team. Each conversation revealed new aspects of the company's work and Marcus's ability to contribute meaningfully to their projects. In the materials laboratory, Marcus discussed his ideas about structural integration of thermal management components. In the testing facility, he offered insights about real-world operating conditions that could improve their validation procedures. With each interaction, his confidence grew, and his excitement about the possibilities became more evident. Your team is impressive, Marcus told Eleanor as they took a break in the company cafeteria. The level of innovation and collaboration here is remarkable. They're good people working on important problems, but they've been somewhat isolated from real-world applications. Your practical experience could provide valuable perspective. I have to admit, this is exactly the kind of work I dreamed about when I first became an engineer. Solving problems that make a real difference in people's lives. Eleanor smiled. That's what I hoped you'd say, because I have a proposition that could make those dreams reality. She led him to a conference room where several senior staff members had gathered, including Amanda, CFO David Walsh, and HR Director Michelle Cooper. The formal setting made Marcus slightly nervous, but Eleanor's warm introduction helped put him at ease. I've asked you all here because I want to announce something important, Eleanor began. Whitman Technologies is going to establish a new research and development facility in Millbrook, Ohio, focused on thermal management systems for electric vehicles. The room erupted in surprised conversation as the implications sank in. This was clearly the first time most of the staff had heard about the expansion plans. Marcus Rivera will be leading this facility as our Director of Thermal Systems Engineering, Eleanor continued. He'll be responsible for developing the next generation of cooling technologies while building a team of engineers and technicians in Ohio. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Eleanor was announcing. Eleanor, I'm honored by your confidence, but this is a huge responsibility. It's exactly the right responsibility for the right person at the right time, she replied. Firmly. Amanda leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. Marcus, your thermal zone concept could be the foundation for an entire new product line. If we can prove the concept works, it could revolutionize how we approach cooling systems. The business case is compelling, added David Walsh. Lower operating costs in Ohio, access to skilled manufacturing workers, proximity to automotive suppliers. It makes sense financially. Michelle Cooper opened a folder and pulled out several documents. We've prepared a comprehensive employment package, including relocation assistance, family medical coverage, and a research budget for developing your thermal management concepts. Eleanor placed the documents in front of Marcus. The base salary is competitive with senior engineering positions in Detroit, but with a cost of living that will allow you to provide excellent care for your mother and build real financial security. Marcus looked at the salary figure and felt his breath catch. It was nearly double what he had earned in his previous engineering position, enough to transform not just his own circumstances, but his entire family's quality of life. There's something else, Eleanor said. We're committed to hiring locally when possible, training programs for recent graduates, apprenticeships for young people interested in technical careers, partnerships with local educational institutions. You're talking about potentially dozens of jobs, Marcus said, thinking of Miguel and other young people in Millbrook who were looking for opportunities. Initially, yes, but if the facility succeeds, it could grow significantly. We're looking at this as a long-term investment in both technology development and community partnership. Marcus thought about his conversation with Miguel, about Pete's retirement plans, about his mother's encouragement to take risks for meaningful opportunities. Everything seemed to be aligning in a way that felt almost too good to be true. I need to ask about my mother's medical care, Marcus said. We've already researched specialists in Cleveland who could manage her treatment, Michelle replied. Less than an hour's drive from Millbrook, with our insurance covering all costs. We can arrange for her current doctors to transfer her complete medical history. Eleanor stood and walked to the window overlooking Detroit's skyline. Marcus, I'm not going to pressure you for an immediate decision, but I want you to understand that this opportunity represents more than just a job change. It's a chance to transform your career, your community, and potentially the entire electric vehicle industry. How so? Your ideas about distributed thermal management, structural integration, phase change materials, all of it represents genuinely innovative thinking. With proper resources and support, you could develop technologies that change how electric vehicles are designed and manufactured. Marcus looked around the room at faces that showed genuine excitement about the possibilities being discussed. These were accomplished professionals who clearly believed in Eleanor's vision and, apparently, in his potential to contribute to it. When would you need an answer? Take the time you need, but I'd like to begin planning the facility development. Within the next month, the sooner we can get started, the sooner we can begin making a difference. Marcus spent the rest of the day touring the facility, meeting additional staff members, and discussing technical details about the proposed Millbrook operation. Each conversation reinforced his growing conviction that this opportunity was both real and achievable. On the drive back to Millbrook that evening, Marcus called his mother from the road. "How did it go, mijo?" "Better than I could have imagined. Mom, she offered me the position, Director of Thermal Systems Engineering, leading a new facility in Millbrook." Calm and silence lasted so long that Marcus wondered if the call had been dropped. "Mom, are you there?" "I am here. I am just thanking God for answered prayers. She's offering enough money that we could afford a nice house, proper medical care for you, everything we've been struggling to manage. And you would be using your mind for important work again. Yes, developing technology that could make electric vehicles better, safer, more efficient. Then what are you waiting for?" Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with the medical arrangements. Marcus, if this woman can build electric cars, I think she can help me find good doctors. I'm going to accept the offer. Good. Come home and we will celebrate." The news of Marcus's new position spread through Millbrook with the speed that only small-town communication networks could achieve. By the time he arrived at Kowalski's corner the next morning, Pete already had coffee ready and a congratulatory smile on his face. "So it's official?" Pete asked. "It's official. I start in 3 weeks, initially commuting to Detroit for training, then transitioning to lead the new facility here." "Facility here?" Marcus explained Eleanor's plans for establishing the Research and Development Center in Millbrook, hiring local workers and creating long-term economic opportunities for the community. Pete sat down heavily in his chair behind the counter. 30 years, I've been watching this town slowly die. Young people leaving, businesses closing, hope getting harder to find. And you're telling me that one breakdown in a thunderstorm is going to change all of that? It's going to help. Eleanor is committed to making this work, not just as a business venture, but as a community partnership. And what about us, the station? Pete, you've been like a father to me these past 2 years. Anything I can do to help you transition to retirement, I will. Pete waved away the offer. Don't worry about an old man, Marcus. You've got bigger things ahead of you. Danny arrived for his shift and immediately began pestering Marcus with questions about the facility and whether there might be opportunities for someone with his limited experience. "Danny, if you're serious about learning automotive technology, this could be exactly the opportunity you need. They're planning training programs and apprenticeships. Really? I could learn to work on electric cars and maybe become an engineer someday? If you're willing to work for it, absolutely." Miguel appeared after school, having heard the news from his mother. His excitement was infectious as he bombarded Marcus with questions about the technology they would be developing and the possibilities for local employment. "Mr. Marcus, does this mean I should definitely pursue engineering in college?" "Miguel, this means you should pursue excellence in whatever field excites you." "But yes, engineering could definitely lead to opportunities right here in Millbrook." That evening, Marcus sat in his mother's living room, filling out the employment paperwork that would officially make him Director of Thermal Systems Engineering at Whitman Technologies. Carmen watched him sign the documents with obvious pride and satisfaction. "You know what this means," she said as he completed the final signature. "That I'm about to become very busy? That you remembered how to believe in yourself again." 3. Months later, the construction of the Whitman Technologies Research and Development Center was well underway in what had once been an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of Millbrook. Marcus divided his time between Detroit, where he continued learning the company's systems and procedures, and Millbrook, where he was overseeing the facility development and beginning to hire local staff. Miguel had been accepted to Ohio State University with a partial scholarship and plans to study electrical engineering. Danny was enrolled in the company's technical training program, preparing for a position as a laboratory technician. Even Pete had found new purpose, consulting with Eleanor's team about the logistical needs of bringing technology workers to a small Ohio town. Eleanor visited Millbrook regularly, monitoring the progress of the facility and developing relationships with local officials and business owners. She had purchased a small house in town, finding that she enjoyed the pace and community spirit that were so different from her corporate environment in Detroit. "Any regrets?" she asked Marcus one evening as they walked through the construction site that would soon become his laboratory and office. "About leaving the gas station? None at all. About taking this risk? Not a single one. Your thermal zone cooling system is exceeding all our performance projections. The patent applications are already being processed." Marcus looked at the framework of the building that would house his research team and felt profound gratitude for the storm that had brought Eleanor into his life. Sometimes the best opportunities really do come disguised as problems that need solving. And sometimes the most talented people are found in the most unexpected places. As they stood watching the sunset over Millbrook, both Eleanor and Marcus knew they had discovered something more valuable than any engineering innovation: the power of recognizing potential, taking risks on people, and believing that extraordinary achievements can emerge from ordinary circumstances when given the right support and opportunity. The gas station attendant had indeed received the keys to a new life, but more importantly, he had unlocked the door to a future that would benefit an entire community for generations to come. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.